Welcome back to the channel, and as we near in on launch, the hype around college football 26 is at an all-time high. So what better way to keep the masses entertained than my personal hardest dynasty recommendations for your first dynasty. Of course, we know little to nothing about the team overalls, roster constructions, and the general gameplay on the field, but we can use last year's placings and the style of gameplay to kind of predict what it's going to be like, since we are assuming it's going to be very similar. And there is always vibes to go off of, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing here. Be sure to subscribe today to keep up to date on all sorts of dynasty content. And if you enjoy data-driven rankings, stay tuned as well, as we will be releasing our hardest rebuilds within the first few weeks of release to give you all a more accurate measurement based off of hard data like overall recruiting pipelines and school ratings. So today, let's dive in and take a look at who will be the hardest rebuilds to do in college football 26. As I like to do with most of my non-data driven videos, is to put a disclaimer out there. And with this one, I wanted to preface that these recommendations are meant to be played on Heisman difficulty with some type of limitations to recruiting. I assume most of us realize that if we wanted to, we could recruit very easily each and every year if we didn't limit ourselves in one way or another. And a big portion of the community knows this, so we always do house rules every season. And there's a lot of times where people will differ on how hard a dynasty is, and I feel like that's the biggest riff. So if you want some of those recommendations for some house rules, be sure to check out the video in the top right hand corner, but let's go ahead and get into it. So to get us started, I won't be ranking these in any fashion, just giving my thoughts on the hardest to get back to dynasty standards in the game. And the first one of the group is going to be Mississippi State. The Bulldogs have been the bottom feeders of the SEC ecosystem for the entirety of my adult life, and this year should be no different. While they have had some small glimpses of hope with top players like Dak Prescott and Chris Jones, but in recent years, things have not been so kind, especially with the resurgence of the state rival in Oxford to the north. Not all of this is necessarily the university's fault, with beloved coach Mike Leach passing away in late 2022. It really threw the team in an unexpected spiral, which they have been unable to bounce back from. Our next team on the list was able to do the unimaginable back in 2021 and be the first non-power conference school to reach the college football playoffs, and that is the Cincinnati Bearcats. After the glorious undefeated run through the American Conference, the Bearcats got poached in the semifinals by Bama and have yet to really make a return to similar levels after leaving the American Conference for the Big 12, and losing longtime coach Luke Fickell to Wisconsin wasn't any easier. Coming into their third season in the Big 12 with only 4 wins total in the first 2 years, it almost seems impossible for them to get back to the top. Being based in a recruiting hotbed like Ohio, one would think they may have a leg up on some far-flung big programs, and with the new changes to the localized recruiting in college football 26, it may be the right time to take the red and black back to the college football playoff. Moving out west, we have arguably one of the biggest powerhouses of college athletics as a whole, and that is the Stanford Cardinals. Routinely on top of leaderboards for things like most Olympic medals or even GPA of athletes, we have seen a stiff fall off of football talent in the last half decade. With their most wins in a season since COVID being 4 in that very same year, we really haven't heard much of a school that produced top NFL talent like Richard Sherman, Christian McCaffrey, and Andrew Luck. But with the latter now taking the helm at the GM spot of this former university, you can tell there is a new vision focused on football that is ready to take shape. Getting the Cardinal back to even a bowl game may be a hard challenge after their 6-season drought, one of the longest of any P4 program. It may be a tall task to get a few titles there as well. If all things go haywire, maybe Luck has a year of COVID eligibility left to help you out. Sticking in the same state, we head down the coast to the Trojans of USC. I could go on and on about former Heisman winners and elite coaches who have all made stops here, but most college fans know the dominance of those early 2000s USC teams. But in the last handful of seasons, the programs look to be on the up and up, with the new coach and a former Heisman winning quarterback making the move to Cali, but it didn't go as planned and the team has faltered ever since. Now with elite facilities soon to be completed and a fan base eager for more success, it is the right time to take the helm for a rebuild of one of the biggest former dynasties in college football. Moving back east a little bit for our last Power 5 school of the list, Michigan State was once a yearly threat to make a run at the Big Ten title. Starting in 2010, the Spartans put together 6 10-plus win seasons in 8 years. This all hit its peak with a berth to the 2015 college football playoff, but since 2017, they have only had one 11-win season, and more than half of their years have ended with losing records. Now with a new, young, former 4-star dual-threat quarterback in Aiden Childs, who is entering his 3rd year, he could be the catalyst that takes the Spartans to some big wins this season. But before we getting back to the top, you would have to dismount 2 most recent national title winners in Ohio State and Michigan, and some hungry new additions to the conference in teams like Oregon. Next up, I wanted to run through some of the interesting, tough rebuilds down in the G5. Since most of these would be on the harder side anyways, I wanted to kind of couple them all into one smaller section. The first obvious ones are the newest teams on the block in Delaware and Missouri State. Missouri State is likely going to be the lowest rated team in college football 26 after a miserable season in the FCS last year. It doesn't get any easier at the top level. Another one is going to be Kennesaw State in a pretty similar situation to Delaware and Missouri State, but they do have at least one more season under their belt in the FBS. Second to last would be Liberty after getting dismantled in the Fiesta Bowl by Oregon 2 seasons ago. After their undefeated regular season, they fell far from expectations this past year, also losing their quarterback of the last few years to Colorado. It will be exponentially harder now than ever for them to get back to their 2023 standards. And lastly of this group would have to go to Hawaii. As the most remote university in college football with no opponent closer than thousands of miles away, it is difficult to travel and recruit top talent to the islands. Having some excellent years here and there, they haven't seen much success in the last half decade. And for our last section, with Team Builder getting massive updates like player editing right in the browser, and with teams migrating right over from College Football 25, I thought it would be fun to throw these teams in here at the end. These are going to be real life teams, but with these not being real teams in the game, you can make these as hard as you want to make them. But the first one on this list will always be the Idaho Vandals, who were the last team to ever move down to the FCS ranks. Not that you can add it in the game, but in real life, having the Kibbie Dome is always one of the coolest things to have in college football. Another team here would be Sacramento State. The Hornets may have one of the biggest and fastest pushes for a fundraising move up to the FBS that we have seen in recent years, although they are still coming off a miserable 3-9 record in 2024, so there's still a ton of work to be done if they plan on joining the revised Pac-12 soon. Another West Coast team that is actually joining the Pac-12 is Gonzaga. Although they are a powerhouse in basketball, they haven't had a football team since 1941. While being a very small school, it would be awesome if they somehow made a return to the field. And lastly would be North Dakota State. While in theory being easier than some actual FBS teams to rebuild, it would be interesting to see if you could maintain the dominance that you have had for the last dozen or so years down in the FCS level. Moving them to the Big 12 is the obvious choice, but even as a member of the new Pac-12, they may come to dominate them both, as the only really reason they are still in the FCS is due to travel expenses and making too much money from winning so often. And with that, those are my hardest or most interesting rebuilds for you all to try out at launch of College Football 26. Let me know who I missed on below in the comments, or if you disagree with any of the teams I chose. And don't forget to subscribe, as we will be back with data-driven assessment of all the actual hardest teams rebuild after launch. I appreciate y'all tuning in, and I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you all in the next one.